Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Rabbinic Intern Rachel Cohn, and I will be speaking a bit about Behar. In Parshat Behar, which combines with Parshat Bechugotai, we read many of the laws of the Shmita year. And while we might think it's difficult to relate to Shmita, the 7-year agricultural cycle of letting the land rest, I would like to point out a couple parallels to Shabbat that I think can help us relate to this commandment as people who are mostly not tied to the agricultural calendar in our everyday lives. So first of all, Shmita is actually supposed to be Shabbat of the land. We read in Leviticus 25, verse 2, God says, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I am giving you, the land will rest, a Shabbat to God." So we see that it, like animals are supposed to have Shabbat, like humans are supposed to have Shabbat, that the land itself is also supposed to have a Shabbat. So it's something that I think ties our humanly cycles to agricultural cycles. And we also, you might hear some echoes of Shabbat in this other verse, chapter 25, verse 3. 6 years you will plant your field, and 6 years you will prune your vineyard and gather your produce. Before then you have the Shemitah year. We hear echoes of that in the Kiddush from Shabbat day that says, 6 days you shall do your work and do your labors, before Shabbat comes. So I think similar to the way that on Shabbat we appreciate it in part because of the franticness of the work leading up to it, to help us appreciate that sigh of relief when Shabbat comes. The 7-year Shmita cycle functions similarly, where we're actually supposed to be working the land, supposed to be using our human faculties and ability to manipulate things for 6 years, to have that 1 year afterwards where we can really appreciate that that also we're not in charge of everything, and letting the land rest is an equal part of that balance. And I think the last parallel I'll point out is that, like Shabbat, I think Shmita is supposed to change us on a spiritual level, in the way that we create a mishkan in time, a sacred container for time, appreciating the limitedness of time in some ways on Shabbat. We create a sacred process for honoring the foods that nourish us through Shmita. And I think there's a connection in that same vulnerability and humility and awe and reverence for God, I think, that can come as a result of it, whether it's reverence for our time or reverence for the ability to work the land and nourish ourselves. So while we may not all be spending every Shmita year working on a farm, though I do recommend it. I was on a farm the last Shmita year. I think we can resonate with the teachings of Shmita practices just by getting in touch with our own understanding of Shabbat itself, to think about what it would mean to have Shabbat ha'aretz, or a resting of the land. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom as you encounter these many forms of Shabbat this week.